Okay, well, on that topic, I'm going to watch a couple of these things that, and then give my thoughts on them. And I think this will be where I finish up for the night once I watch these. So there's a couple of videos talking about continuation of the expanded universe. One by Revanchist, which is Marcel Ryan. And then the other one by Quinlan Voss, which is Brennan. And I'm going to see what they say. There's 13 minutes each approximately. And if I bring this to YouTube, I don't know if I'll edit them together or separately, but we'll see. So I'm curious in what they're saying. This was 6 days ago, and then Brennan's was not it's long ago. It was sort of a couple of days after. Yeah. We'll see what points they make, I reckon.
Hello everyone. This is a video I've been meaning to make for a while. Really just wanting to get my thoughts out for posterity's sake on how I view continuation of the Star Wars expanded universe. It should go without saying that I'm only really speaking for myself here.
That's cool.
You know, sometimes I feel like there are as many different takes on continuation as there are Star Wars fans. It's a pretty divided fan base. So this came up more recently in the context of a Screen Rant article that talked about why Star Wars should bring back the expanded universe. I know it generated a bit of buzz in my usual circles, and it's nice to see a more mainstream reflection of what many of us have been feeling since 2014. But what happened in 2014, you say? Well, for those of you just joining us, in April 2014, Lucasfilm discontinued the expanded universe and rebranded it as Legends to focus on its new continuity that would be built around the main 6 films and the Clone Wars cartoon that debuted in 2008. With that introduction out of the way, there is one disclaimer I have. Before you take to the comments to tell me how wrong I am, keep in mind that I'm not really looking to convince anyone of anything. That said, it can get exhausting to constantly explain my position to people who want to get into it. So I thought, wouldn't it be nice to just link them to a video outlining what I think?
Yeah, that's what I did with Defending the Expanded Universe stuff ages ago. Which, who knows if I might revamp that or not. If I feel the need to revamp it, I may. Whereas, like, okay, I'm saying this over and over again, why don't I just link a video? That's a good thing for YouTube to do as well. And also, for his point of, like, not trying to convince someone and all that, yeah. I'm looking at these videos as a way to open discussion about it, and we can have different viewpoints and all that. And that's just like I'm watching the two together. It's like, it'll be a bit like a discussion without having an active discussion with the people there. And I've done a bit with Marcel and Brennan before. I've been on live streams and we did a video game discussion. Oh no, that was with Alec. Yeah, that was with Marcel. Yeah, sorry. It's been a while. And it's like, in the way of knowing people, it's like I know a bit about how they are with the expanded universe and that sort of thing, and how they portray themselves online and discussions and that, which is nice. I think there was some things come up in a preview, after a previous video of like, okay, I didn't address it much, but it's like I still feel like even in EU fan circles, there's people I sort of know their position on the EU and their approach to some things, but I don't know them as people quite as much, just because we don't talk a whole lot. I don't know why I'm mentioning that now, but that's the thing. It's like, okay, time zones are an issue, all their shenanigans, but also it ends up being like, okay, I feel like there's different cliques in the expanded universe fandom and that sort of thing. This is probably around can go a completely different direction. Let's just see what he says.
Then, if they actually decide to listen to it, they can berate me for what I really think instead of what they think that I think. So here goes. Yeah. Buckle up. What does continuation mean to me? Well, it's very simple. For most of my childhood and early adulthood, Lucasfilm was making content that I liked. In April 2014, they stopped making that content. And I would like for them to continue making more of that content. That's it. It's that straightforward. Roll credits. I think where things start to get complicated is when people add complexity or assumptions to the discussion. From my perspective, that complexity is unwarranted and irrelevant to the discussion of continuation as it currently stands. What do I mean by that? Well, talking about how continuation should look kind of presupposes that continuation is on the table. And as far as I can tell, continuation is not on the table. I've seen no hint that it's even in the same room as the table, as far as Lucasfilm is concerned.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything about it actually happening either. There's been... Technically there's SWTOR, and technically there's Marvel 108, but I feel like Marvel 108 was an exception, and that was a Marvel-driven thing by that particular person, and it was more of a promotion for new canon comics than it was a proper someone wanting to continue that series. And SWTOR is just like, well, they put so much money into it, they don't want it to go away, and there's a fairly large fan base in there. Must be making enough money that they don't shut it down. And obviously, in the games circles, they aren't going to make their own MMO for Star Wars.
All the qualifiers people place on continuation, I will simply say that I want the expanded universe to continue. Whenever I mention that I want more expanded universe content, I get a variety of different responses ranging from, "Hell yeah, brother," to the eye-roll-inducing quote, "Let the past die." More often than not, people tend to get upset with me, particularly if they're fans of the new stuff, and they think I'm saying that the new stuff is bad. So let me just say that in this video, I'm not weighing in on whether any of the new canon content is good or bad or this or that. That's not the point of this discussion. You can find plenty of places where that discussion takes place on the internet. Right now, I just want to have a chat about what the continuation of the expanded universe means to me. So let me take this opportunity to clear up some misconceptions and assumptions that people make about my views. In no particular order. Yes, I want more Star Wars content set in the expanded universe. No, I don't want it or expect it to come at the expense of new canon content. Why not cater to both markets? Yes, I think it's perfectly acceptable to be a fan of both continuities. No, I don't think it's acceptable to disparage one continuity at the expense of the other. Yes, I believe that both timelines can coexist. And yes, I believe that consumers will be able to tell the difference between EU content and canon content.
I think that last one especially, they have a label for it now. They just need to put the Legends label on it, and then people would go, oh, that's a different timeline. They've made it really easy for people to tell. If they print something new, they just need to put the Legends titling in it. Even if I'm not a huge fan of that, that's something that they've done, and it's like, well, if they're going to do something new in the expanding universe, they will accept that. And only saying about not weighing in on the new canon and that, I was just thinking, it's like, well, I'd probably say it's not my cup of tea. Like I tried the new canon, I don't like it personally, but it's not that other people can't. It just feels like it's for a different audience than me. And yeah, I'll say it's crap because that's my opinion, but obviously not the point of the video.
Don't give people enough credit. We live in the era of the multiverse. Thanks to the MCU, this concept has entered the mainstream. Expanded universe content sits right beside new canon content on bookshelves in literally every bookstore I've visited over the past 10 years. It's hard to mistake an EU book for a canon book when EU books have the Legends banner on them. Is there a business case for new expanded universe content? Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but I believe that new EU would sell as well, if not better, than current canon content. For one thing, more risks could be taken, which has generally resulted in fairly interesting outcomes. And I think it would have the added effect of introducing new fans to the expanded universe, which would help boost sales of reprints from Del Rey and Marvel. Everybody wins. At the very least, I think it's a market worth exploring. So let's recap. I don't think it harms or dilutes the brand to cater to two different markets. I think consumers will understand the difference. And I think there's a very clear value proposition for continuation. Next comes the dreaded question.
I think, very much. There will at least be a bunch of EU fans that'll be like, that's an official continuation of the EU. You've got guaranteed sales for that. And you don't have to do something more intensive like a comic, which you would need to hire a penciler, an inker, the writer, all of that. You could write a novel, and that's one author, and do it that way, and then you could test the market first, and then see how things go.
And the most common criticism that I hear about continuation, it's something I like to call the Disney factor. If I had $1 for every time I've heard or read, well, I want more EU, but not if it's from Disney, then I might have enough money to outright buy Star Wars from Disney.
Yes.
I'm not here to disparage that take. I think it's a perfectly valid take, even if I don't agree with it. There's very little I can say to change anyone's mind on this. Believe me, I've tried. So I'll just focus on what I think. Remember, friends, this is for posterity only.
So, from my point of view, I think if Lucasfilm would continue the expanded universe with the same care and attention and quality that it had before, then that would be good. But it is difficult to know that until they do it. And I don't know if I would particularly say, it's Disney's fault 100%, because you have a whole lot of other factors that even if Lucasfilm broke away from Disney, whatnot, you could say, well, they're still going to do the same thing. Or it could completely revamp it and make it better, who knows? And some people like the Disney approach. You never know. But I think a lot of people have this thing of instantly saying, Disney, 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 and not treating Lucasfilm as a separate entity and seeing the people at Lucasfilm's vision for Star Wars is what we see with the new canon, and then it's the sort of thing of like, I would want different people working on the EU, generally speaking. But if they're like, okay, this is what people like with the EU, and then continue on the way that it was, I'd be all for it. But it's like something that you don't know until it's continued, and that's what I've said before, where I'd rather have a attempt to continue and be bad than it not continue at all. I said that at one point. And now I'm just like, well, I've kind of made my peace with it because we see nothing about a continuation. And so it's like, well, we have what we have kind of thing now, and I'll just enjoy that. And I still haven't finished reading the EU, so there is that. 50 years, 77... 53 years? Something like that. From now? Hang on. No, yeah, something like that. It's like 80 years in the US. The original Star Wars would be in the public domain, but not the published works afterwards, which would be another 80 years since its release, which would be technical.
From the top. Yes, I want continuation, even if that means continuation under Disney Lucasfilm. Yes, I think it is worth the risk. Absolutely I do. Will they mess it up or do a bad job? Again, I'm not a fortune teller. I think, realistically speaking, it's more likely to be a mixed bag. Even so, I'll take the mixed bag. Every now and then, there could be a gem that makes it all worth it.
On the left, Anakin Solo. From memory, that's this is one of the covers for New Jedi Order, and you got your friend right underneath him, right here. Hey, hamster. I'd say that with the expanded universe, that is something that is like with new canon for me as well. It was like, I probably like some things in the new canon if I take them by themselves. But if we are going, I need to read all of it to find it, and then most of it I don't enjoy, I'm not going to pursue that. So, depending on how continuation would be, you've got stuff to do with that. And it's like, well, is it worth me pushing? It'll be a clear cut-off date too, because it's like, okay, they're continuing it from here, so you can choose whether you want to follow that or not.
I'll give you an example. If the EU had been discontinued after NJO or in 2008, we never would have gotten one of my favorite books.
And the new Thrawn trilogy I'd probably like as well. Stuff like that.
The masterfully written Darth Plagueis by James Luceno. To me, that book alone is worth anything questionable that came before it. Moving on. Another qualifier I hear people place on continuation is that they would accept continuation if Lucasfilm hired the old authors who wrote for the EU to come back and write. My own perspective is that it would likely be, again, a mixed bag of old and new authors. I think there are authors who have written for the new canon that have proven themselves not only up to the task, but enthusiastic at the prospect. Kevin Scott, for instance, comes to mind. That said, would I love to see someone like Michael Stackpole return to write for a continued expanded universe? You bet I would. I just don't see this as a deal breaker like some other people do.
I think it's unrealistic to expect all of the old authors to come back as well. And then you also have ones that are like, well, Timothy Zahn wrote for the expanded universe, and then he also writes for new canon. But I've always been of the thought of that having new authors have their bit in is one of the great things you can do. And it would harken back to the days of like West End games where fans would submit short stories, and then the ones that are good quality and that they liked would be printed in the books. It would be really cool. And it's not like you can have the same authors all the time anyway, because eventually the author will die, and then what? Yeah, it's not like only said people can build off of the EU lore. And any good writer would be good. You just need to have them release the book, and then you use your own judgment to see whether you like it or not. I don't know the fella he named, but that's fine. And it's also like James S.A. Corey did like one EU novel, and then apparently he's written other sci-fi stuff. And I haven't read any of that, but maybe I should at one point, because I did like the way The Honor Among Thieves was written. But I've got so many things. I was looking through my books, was that last night or the night before, and going, there's all these books that I've read parts of this author's works when I was younger, and I want to revisit them. And then also, they've got newer books now. An example being the Skullduggery Pleasant series. And book 8, the 18th main book of the series is going to come out next year, I think it was. I'm like, bruh, it's still going? Yeah. And so what like he says about Darth Plagueis, and we're saying about Zahn and that, it was really cool, because like George Lucas gave him the West End Games material, and Lock-On, especially when you mentioned the cloaking device in Enter the Empire, the limitations of that cloaking device and how it worked came from the West End Games material, and it was incorporated into the lore because that was established, and all of that, which was really cool. And so people actually cared to find out what's already existing and how can we use it and connect it together and all that. It was very cool.
Now, some may be listening to this and wonder at this point whether I have any standards. Well, of course I do. But I think it takes a big assumption to decide something is going to be bad before it is even made.
Yeah.
Sure, we can look at past precedent for guidance, but it won't predict current outcomes with 100% accuracy. I try to
An example of something not working out as good is how SWTOR's story writing has become after the sidelining of the expanded universe. Because we do see a drop in the quality of the writing post formation of the new canon. Let's use all these different words. Yeah. Charles, what's your name? No, Epigemus band or whatever. This is also handy. Impedimos band or something. I'm having a moment. What was his name again? And then you can't just look it up, can you? And Patageus brand. I thought it was something close to that. In Patageus brand. In Dark Empire. Now, Dark Empire is a bit of a take it or leave it. His name's weird, but yeah. Yeah. No, the example of SWTOR is like ever since like Knights of the Fall. I would say since Knights of the Fallen Empire began as an expansion, and the Eternal Empire stuff was introduced. I would say there's a drop in the quality of the storytelling, and then as time's gone on, you can look at my SWTOR streams. I can clearly see that there is a difference in attention to detail of lining up with the expanded universe, and it might also be because of the inclusion of new canon stuff as cosmetics and some things, but yeah, there's a drop in the quality of the storytelling, and you would go, okay, do we take that as expanded universe or not? It's up to you as a fan. Robotnik finals. He is an Eggman.
Keep an open mind. I'll give you another example. For years.
But also, yeah, something good could come out and be really good if they actually decided, we're going to continue the expanded universe and we want it to be good and follow what came before and all that, because some of the biggest issues are either plot holes or some things are not lining up with the expanded universe in SWTOR.
People told me The Crystal Star was the worst Star Wars book ever written. It was one of the few Bantam books I never read as a child, largely because of what people said about it. Well, I finally got around to reading it as an adult, and it turned out to be one of my all-time favorite Star Wars books.
That's interesting, yeah. I'm interested when I finally get to it, because I still haven't read The Crystal Star yet. And I wonder what I'll think of it.
Taste is subjective. Even stuff that has mass appeal can lose its allure over time. And then there are things that are not well received at first, but will undergo a renaissance years later. We see a bit of that
You mean Jedi Prince?
These days with the more widespread acceptance of the prequel films. My point is that none of the qualifiers people put on what continuation has to look like for them really tend to resonate with me. While I can understand where they're coming from on an intellectual level, I don't at all agree with these imagined roadblocks to continuation. And like I said earlier, all of this talk about what continuation should look like kind of puts the cart before the horse.
Yeah. I would say Jedi Prince, the basic plot works well, and there's some fun stuff in it, but the execution is probably very different to what it would be if it was written later. But it is one of the first introductions of a human replica droid and all that.
It presupposes that continuation is on the table. And
the worst part about Jedi Prince, I keep pausing them, I'll go back a little bit so we get the full sentence later. The worst part about Jedi Prince is that they didn't finish the series because they were like, oh, it's not popular, let's cancel it. And then there were 3 more books to come after that then never got released. And I'm like, it ends at a point where you know something will not work out. But
And like I said earlier, all of this
it's a single glove.
talk about what continuation should look like kind of puts the cart before the horse.
Mm-hmm.
It presupposes that continuation is on the table. And as far as I know, it's not. But while we're on the subject of what...
He's going to something different now, but it presupposes continuation is on the table. Dark side artifacts are always a big thing in Star Wars. So I would forgive that a bit. Other than it should be destroyed. Anyway. Where was my brain thinking? Presupposes continuations on the table, but it is also, I think, a point to say that when you're asking for continuation of the expanded universe, you do want to make sure that you have standards in how you ask. This is something that I've thought of when, with the Twin Suns Foundation's billboards and things like that, is like, how you ask will make a difference to what the end product is if it comes out. So rather than just saying I want a continuation, I tend to go, I want a continuation that does line up with the lore of the expanded universe. Like, you'd think some things are a given, but they may not be, because Marvel 108 was technically a continuation of the Marvel comics, and yet some of that did not line up internally within the Marvel comics. So I will go, based on some previous examples like that, we would want to make sure that there's quality storytelling and an attention to detail in how it connects with the lore. And that would be the main thing, is like, and then people might think that's a given, but it's like, well, if you're just asking for a continuation and they're like, here you go, we don't really care about this, here's something. That's where you get low quality stuff and stuff that you won't like. Unless the author is also a fan, like a lot of the authors of the Expanded Universe were. But I do think that when asking for continuation of the Expanded Universe, and I think I've always said this, is you do want to make sure to say more than just I want it to be continued, because then you're setting the expectation that you won't just accept anything if it's got the Legends label on it or is said to be Expanded Universe. Because you could read something that comes out and go, look, what they're doing with this just doesn't work. I'm not going to follow that. And I think that a lot of people in the Expanded Universe fandom would feel a similar way, of like, if they bring out something that you don't agree with, or that blatantly contradicts the Expanded Universe, like, sure, they can go in a direction we don't agree with. I'm going to rescind that last little bit. But if something blatantly contradicts the Expanded Universe lore in the book that comes out, regardless of the quality of the storytelling, that's always going to put a dampener on it. Little things are always forgivable in certain ways, but there are some big main parts of the lore that is like, we should not contradict that. Unless you end up going, let's write an infinity story, which you could still do. And
of what it should look like, I wanted to provide some of my thoughts on what it could look like. Well, for starters, I would be happy with a continuation limited to comic books, novels, and video games.
Oh boy, this is from the... yeah. Okay. Let's go back to this.
While we're on the subject of what it should look like, I wanted to provide some of my thoughts on what it could look like.
Okay.
Well, for starters, I would be happy with a continuation limited to comic books, novels, and video games. I don't need live-action Star Wars set in the expanded universe. Would I turn my nose up at live-action EU content? No, of course I wouldn't. but I generally prefer the books and comics in any event. And I think, frankly, that's where the EU really shined. Another...
Yeah. There's a lot of that. I would say I'd be happy just with novels and short stories. Even the SWTOR short stories posted on the website as a blog. Something that's like, I really like this, but you can't... Some of them end up kind of needing to be familiar with the story of SWTOR to be able to understand the context of, because they are short stories written to connect pieces of the story together. But short stories even, and novels and prose, is like, yeah, and they would be lower cost than comics. If they don't want to put as much cost into it, just make novels and short stories, I'd be quite happy with that. Maybe bring out a source book that would tie up and retcon some of the specific continuity errors created by the Clone Wars. Oh, Rebels in general just looks bad.
thing that people tend to get hung up on is this idea that expanded universe fans should be happy when characters or concepts from the EU are imported into new canon. While I wouldn't begrudge anyone the happiness and excitement that may bring them, my own perspective is that this does not at all represent what I want or mean by continuation.
No, that's not continuation. That's taking... Oh, as he said, people are familiar with the multiverse now. You're taking an alternate universe version of a character and putting it in there, rather than the character with the background and the personality that you actually know from the expanded universe. Or, as I would rather not treat it as a multiverse, because there's no clear split-off point in a timeline where the fundamental rules of the world and the laws of the Force and things change. You would go, it's just a character that looks similar and with the same name but acts differently. In an Infinities comic, yes. And it was labelled Infinities, so it was just a fun what if.
I have been saying for years that I want continuation, not integration. That still holds true. I'd rather see the stories of these characters continued in the timeline that matters most to me.
Yeah.
It's like...
No, it's not entirely bad. And you can have a short comic and have fun with a lot of things. And they had the Infinities label specifically for some of the things like that they could have fun with. Rather than going, oh, look, this crossover is actually canonical. But I think with the way the new canon works, right, I know enough about it just from watching some of the movies and whatever at the time and stuff. The fundamental way the Force works is different, as depicted in The Last Jedi, especially. The Rian Johnson movie, not Expanded Universe, works. And so that changes the perception all the way back to when the universe was formed, and then if your point where the multiverse splits off is when the universe was formed, you might as well just have completely separate timelines. That's how I feel it is. It's not entirely bad, but I don't think Star Wars is the IP to do it with. As an actual canonical event. Infinities were always fun stories, and you can muck around and do whatever with them. But as actual canonical stuff that would be like, this is actual lore.
This. Importing a character into a different timeline, where they will likely have different stakes and motivations, does not jive well with me. Other people have explained this concept better than I can. But it lacks the same emotional impact when I see these characters or concepts from the EU outside of what I consider to be their natural habitat, for lack of a better term.
They also act differently, like they're written a bit differently. Like, yes, we get Zahn writing the new Thrawn trilogy, whatever, he probably acts very similarly in that. I don't know. But in Rebels, he is written differently. and there are things that don't jive well with what I would think of expanded universe Thrawn.
So, while it may be an intellectually interesting exercise, I don't really care for it. Here's another way I can describe it. Having ice cream in the winter versus having ice cream on a hot summer day. While it may taste the same in both environments, it hits way different in the summer than it does in the winter. It's an entirely different experience, and I vastly prefer one experience over the other. Something that I came across recently in my travels is a post-2014 video clip of Star Wars author Timothy Zahn, where he describes EU stories as stories told around a campfire. I personally think that this is not an accurate reflection of what the expanded universe is.
No.
The EU is...
I said that and I'm like, no. That was... And he said, was that... I'm pretty sure I saw Sam Witwer talk about it. Maybe they're trying to spread that around. But that's where I'm also like, okay, you see post-2014 clips and how some people talk about Star Wars under the vision of Lucasfilm post-2014. They're putting their vision of what Star Wars is out there. And the people start talking differently about Star Wars and showing like what their own interpretation of it is.
Its own timeline, full stop. People like to argue that it was, and I quote, a mess, or riddled with contradictions. I think these types of statements are generally untrue. Yes, it is true that the expanded universe had contradictions. Some eras, like the Clone Wars, had more contradictions than other eras.
Yeah.
I think, however, when you have a property as big as Star Wars, with as many people contributing to it over as many years as they did, there are bound to be contradictions here and there.
Yeah, there's bound to be some, sometimes not as blatant as the thing that was related to the person that was pictured. But a lot of the expanded universe continuity errors are small things that you can explain away, and they're not blatant, obvious contradictions in some ways. One of the ones I'm thinking of is Labyrinth of Evil versus the 2D Clone Wars micro series. It's like one Jedi's there, one's not. They probably just ended up with different... And a lot of the time, it can be just explained as a perspective from someone else telling the story type thing. It's like someone would notice some things and not others.
But what I also saw was a real effort by people who contributed to fix continuity errors and make things work.
Yeah.
No major IP with a cohesive timeline is immune to continuity errors. And I might add that Timothy Zahn did a pretty decent job himself of generally adhering to continuity and things that came before.
Does that say Yuzon Vong instead of Yuzan Vong, or is that the font? Sorry. Yeah, I think they typoed. Do I have a copy of that? I think I have a copy of that. Essential guides. That's the essential chronology talkback thread. The essential chronology. And this would have... Does it have the back in it? It does. It does have the typo. Damn! I don't know. I just noticed that. But yeah. Yeah, these are scans. I should probably look through it at one point. But source books are not as interesting. I'm surprised that there's a typo on the back of the book. Like, sometimes you find them inside the book, but on the back of the book...
I think this notion of campfire stories is a label better applied to stories like Infinities or Star Wars Visions. Those are disparate stories, by design. The EU, on the other hand, is better described as a continuing saga that many people contributed to and yet was still generally cohesive throughout. I think you only need to look as far as the various source books, like the Essential Chronology or the Essential Atlas, to see that cohesion at work. Spreading misinformation about the expanded universe will not help anyone. Then we have the quality argument. I will sometimes hear about how most of the EU was not good. With respect, I won't even bother addressing this point. It just does not at all reflect my own experience with these stories.
It doesn't reflect my experience with most of the stories, but I think in anything with as many stories as the expanded universe and as big as Star Wars is, you're bound to get some that are not as good and some that are better. And some of that's objective and some of that's very subjective, like he said about Crystal Star.
Sometimes hear that the EU was very bloated and needed to end. I don't agree. There were a galaxy of stories worth telling in so many different eras. Thousands upon thousands of stories remain to be told, in my opinion.
Yes, but I can see the point of certain eras seemingly bloated. A bit like, I would say the Rebellion era, you don't want any more Luke, Han, Leia stories. Because they're so jam-packed from the Marvel stories. This is mainly in between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, that they would barely have time to breathe. They just have a story immediately, one after the other. Otherwise, the timeline doesn't make sense. Like, they've got so much stuff that you pretty much know where they are at every single time. But that doesn't stop you from telling a story that's not about them in that time period.
Whole eras were untapped and would have presented fewer issues in terms of potential continuity.
For
errors.
sure.
At the very least, we could have gotten conclusions to stories that were never finished. I'm thinking famously of the Force Unleashed series of video games.
If you take The Force Unleashed by itself, that's fine. It's The Force Unleashed 2 setting up another story, and then 3 was never released, but also 2 was rushed and not finished properly.
Another comment I sometimes hear is someone helpfully reminding me that nobody is taking my old books and comics away. Well, yes, that is obviously true. But again, this kind of comment misses the point entirely. I would invite anyone tempted to say this to refer to my basic premise. I was getting something I liked, I'm no longer getting it, and I would like to get more of it again someday. There are probably a few things that I forgot to touch on, but I've pretty much said what I wanted to say. And again, these are just my thoughts. I'm always interested in hearing other takes, and I encourage people to make these kinds of videos. It'll be fun to revisit this in a couple years, and see whether my thinking has changed or evolved over time. In the meantime, I'll continue to love the expanded universe, and I'll continue to advocate for the kinds of stories that I want to read. Remember, be kind to each other out there, and may the Force be with you.
Nice, yeah. I liked most of what he said. It's an interesting discussion. Oh, what was he saying to say? Nobody's going to take your old books and comics away. No. But I would add the explanation of they're not reprinting some, so what if my old copy gets damaged and I need to replace it? I'm not going to find another copy of Young Jedi Knights or Junior Jedi Knights easily. You have to pay... Oh, actually, let's have a look. Let's have a little squiz. Young Jedi Knights. And you have to go to specific places to find them. Oh, there's still 5... like... not too bad a price. But then you also have some that are ridiculously priced. Episode 1 Adventures, I wonder. No, I need to put Star Wars. What? It's from USA to Bulgaria shipping? Bruh. Okay. I paid $80 for one of these. Also, sometimes they're not all available. Like, these are the ones... That's a game book, not the novel. This is a novel... Like, this is a narrative. This is a game book, which was meant to be used with the game version. And so, if you're looking through specifically, you might not even be able to find the specific one if it ends up damaged and you get further and further away from things. So, Yeah, Shakespeare Star Wars. I think my mum gave me a copy of Shakespeare Star Wars at one point. At least one of them. I think it's still up in Darwin. But yeah, so in the way of no one's taking away your books, what we will be left with is digital copies and not physical. You are a mod, yeah. So yeah. Interesting. Great video. I think he makes some good clear points, addresses some misinformation that is spread around in some parts. I guess the big thing is that there's just so much in the expanded universe that people say is bloated, but it's like, yeah, no one's going to take them away. Well, the Essential Legends collection is printing only the ones they think are essential. Which means to me that they're not going to reprint everything, even though it's kind of weird and you can never tell what they're going to reprint next. So yeah. Let's see what Quinlan Vost's channel or Brennan says, and that was noisy. And then I can finish up for the night because it's getting late.
What's up, everyone? The other day, my friends and I were talking about continuation and misconceptions about it, and my friend Marcel said, alright, I'm gonna make a video about it, and you guys should too.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea then.
And so
that they're actually working together.
Are planning videos. This is my video right now, and I believe Maxine is also making a video for her Instagram. And basically what we all wanted to do is tackle the concept of continuation and talk about what we want to see out of it, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about the topic. For background, what are we even talking about? Let's break this down for the newest of new so that they understand what we're talking about. So, the Star Wars Expanded Universe, which you see behind me, a lot of it at least, the Star Wars Expanded Universe was a collaborative conglomerate of stories, of continuity. It was based around the Star Wars universe, and it began with a novel that was released in 1976, about 6 months before the first movie.
The exact starting point is kind of debated. You could say it was Splinter of the Mind's Eye more, because that was not a movie novel. Or when they started to do it a bit more was Heir to the Empire. Or you could say it's that the Marvel comics probably started it the most. And that's where they started going, here's a movie adaptation, and then also extra stories continuing on from it. So that'd probably be the real start, I'd say, compared to going this novel specifically, which was, yeah, included a lot of information that wasn't in the movie, especially background on the Emperor, but it didn't really go, let's tell a story outside of the movies until Splinter of the Mind's Eye and the Marvel comics.
The Expanded Universe, thus, predated the Star Wars universe. It immediately kicked off with comics, novels, source books, eventually video games, short stories. Anything you can imagine was a part of this extensive expanded universe. There are even films and shows that are only a part of the Star Wars Expanded Universe. The Star Wars Expanded Universe was one timeline, it was one continuity. Events in one piece of media, for example, an event in one...
Yeah, because the holiday special isn't counted as new canon. The basic holiday special story is fine. It's just the execution of it that is not great. And was the first Boba Fett appearance? Yes. And Boba Fett was originally supposed to be a prototype stormtrooper, but then they changed it.
One book would impact another story in a comic or show or video game. These stories weren't contained, they mattered. They mattered for the other stories. They impacted other stories. Whether set thousands of years apart from each other or set very close together, the events could all impact one another. The authors were collaborative. They attempted to weave continuity between all of these projects, and that's what made it super special. What made it special was the fact that these stories connected. One character here might show up here in someone else's story, because it was one timeline, it was one continuity between book, comic, and video game, and other stuff too. And so this was a really special timeline. It was a really special part of Star Wars. It worked to...
Yeah. Some of the reason why I don't watch some of the people too much is some part of us, the algorithm going, here's Star Wars, oh, here's all the new canon crap. But also is like, some of the camera quality and things like, I tend to watch other stuff on YouTube anyway, not Star Wars stuff, because my Star Wars enjoyment's coming from reading and experiencing it myself a lot more anyway. Or talking about it, as we are now.
Fill in the gaps between the movies, explain inconsistencies in the movies, go beyond the movies, before the movies, in between the movies. It worked to fill in the gaps and to really flesh out the universe, expand the universe, if you will. The expanded universe had thousands of pieces of media published for it. When you add them all up, when you get the tally, there were thousands of stories set in this expanded universe by hundreds of different authors who had these amazing jobs, who had these amazing stories, who had this amazing passion. And April 25th, 2014, and they announced that it was all coming to an end. All of these stories that we loved, all of these characters that we enjoyed to follow, gone in an instant, like Thanos' snap. This was the last novel published within the expanded universe.
Technically, his description is a bit wrong, because like the end of the last video by Marcel, it's like, they haven't taken away your books, they still exist. So they're not gone like Thanos snapped them away.
Very sad. We went from 1976 to 2014. And it's pretty disappointing that our stories were no longer there for us to enjoy. These storylines were cut off. We didn't get conclusions. There were many storylines that were in development that were canceled, like Sword of the Jedi, like Mandorla. There were many projects that we just didn't get to see ultimately. And there were many storylines that weren't concluded, like Dawn of the Jedi, SWOTOR, the post-Return of the Jedi era with Crucible to Legacy.
I would say that Dawn of the Jedi seemed to leave off in a decent place at least. They ended the comic books at a decent place where there was an ending to the story rather than it being cut off like some other examples. Crucible, Troy Denning didn't even know it was going to be the last book chronologically, so it wasn't written to account for that.
There were huge gaps in the timeline because they weren't planning for it to end. We didn't get a conclusion. These stories were cut off. The plug was pulled and they were gone. So we don't have conclusions for many of the characters, many of the storylines, many of these events. We're left hanging, and it's really disappointing. So, what do we want? Because there's still a huge fan base for this massive expanded universe. And what do we want out of it? Now, it depends on who you ask. If you go around the fandom, you'll get different answers from several people. But I'd like to talk about what I would like to see out of continuation. And just nail my colors to the wall. What do I want to see? How do I want these stories to return? Well, I've seen some people who will say, oh, we need to erase Disney's canon timeline. The Disney canon timeline was Disney's Lucasfilm stories that started after 2014. I believe Rebels was one of the first projects, and then this includes all the movies post-2014, all the books, comics, video games after 2014. That's all part of the Disney timeline. So they have the High Republic, the sequels, all of that is part of this new timeline. So some expanded universe fans embitterment, resentment.
I always find it weird when they call it the Disney timeline, because Disney technically bought Lucasfilm in 2012. I think it was October 30th, something like that. And so there were actually a couple of years where Disney owned Lucasfilm where we still got expanded universe. I don't know, it's just a little terminology thing that tweaks me. I'm like, that's why I call it new canon. because it is the new canon, not the old canon, which was the expanded universe.
They say, let's erase the Disney canon timeline. Decanonize that. Discontinue that the way that we were decanonized and discontinued. Now, not only do I think that's not very feasible, but there are fans of this new timeline. Why would we want them to go through what we went through? Which was just bitter disappointment, frustration when all of our stories came to a close. Why would we want them to go through that just because we had to go through it? And is it feasible? No. These are huge movies and shows that have been shown to so many people, that have been watched by so many people. Are their numbers down? Sure. But it doesn't diminish their cultural impact. And there has been cultural impact. These have been shown to many people. So,
yeah, cultural impact would be interesting to look at in hindsight. Why not? With it being one of the big examples of like a franchise changing to the point where it loses some of its original audience, and then even people in general, like casuals, are going, well, why do we care? But Star Wars was always a household name, and that sort of thing, and then see what they've done with it and how it's impacted people.
I feel that it's not something that's feasible to put back in the box. So the continuation that I advocate for is not a replacement. We're not going to decanonize the canon storyline and replace it with the Legends Expanded Universe timeline. No. What I want to see is a continuation alongside it. I want to see the original creatives brought back to work on it. People like Timothy Zahn or Michael Stackpole. People like Matthew Stover or James Luceno. People like John Ostrander or Sean Stewart. I want to see the original creatives who had stories within the expanded universe come back to write stories for it.
Drew Karpyshyn is on record saying that he would be very happy to write a Darth Xanon novel as well. So that sort of thing is like, yeah, it would be really cool. Yeah, 2007, what a time. It would be really cool to see originals come back, but I also think if we're thinking about longevity and like what the point was made in Marcel's video, if we think about longevity, we would go, you need new writers as well. But that can also be a thing where I do think that you would need someone that is a continuity editor still for the expanded universe. Not just people going willy-nilly all over the place with whatever they wanted to tell, because limitation breeds creativity and makes the stories better.
And you can absolutely bring in new blood. I know there's people who work on canon who are probably huge fans of the Expanded Universe Legends timeline and would love to have stories set within it. So, because of this, we can bring in some new...
So both of them, when they mention bringing in new people, they mention new canon authors. It can also be people that haven't written Star Wars before. I'm just going to put that out there too. Like, whoever they get to do it, as long as they write a good story.
New blood, but bring back some of the original creatives who had stories, who had work that they had within this timeline. Let them return to continue the stories and wrap up some of these storylines that we never got conclusions to.
I would also say I can see that working really well as like a mentorship type of thing, where the older authors would have the new blood come in and then they would share their knowledge and research and how they've written the expanded universe novels, and then that would help the new people gain a passion for the collaborative way that the EU was written.
Continue it alongside it. We would absolutely buy brand new stories with the Legends banner. After all, we buy reprints with the Legends banner. There would be a huge market for new material published under the Legends Expanded Universe banner.
I think the only thing I have with the banner is Marvel 108. Because it was a new story. Otherwise, I'm like, well, I've got the stories. I don't need another copy of it. That's me, though. Some people get multiple copies of the same book and whatever. It's like, okay, you've got so many editions of it.
And for years, continuation efforts were...
Oh, but I have been buying the unabridged audiobooks that have been released that are the new ones, which is really cool. They have the legend stuff on them, but it's just not in a physical book form.
Kind of laughed at. We were outliers, we were outcasts. But recently there's been kind of a swing in momentum a little bit, where from mainstream articles and journalism, there's people saying that they should continue expanded universe and legend stories. New articles that have been kind of supporting what we've been saying for a decade. It's been really nice to see that turn around. Some people will say continuation isn't feasible. They can't do 2 timelines at once.
There's... is there only that Screen Rant article? I'm just trying to think. Like, are they just trying to build the momentum off the Screen Rant article? Probably, or that's what sparked the conversation that led to this, which is interesting. But also, yeah, we'll see what he says about this, but like, it literally says in Marvel shows us why, and they've had concurrent time multiverses in comics before, so.
Look at Star Trek. They have the Kelvin timeline and the Prime timeline. Both are running concurrently,
I don't know Star
and
Trek.
fans know which is which. It would be easy to know what's a legend story with the banner, what's an expanded universe story, and what's a new story for the canon timeline. You could absolutely continue 2 universes and have new material coming out in both of them simultaneously. That way everyone's happy. Fans of the new stuff, fans of the old stuff. We're all getting new stories to enjoy. And for people who say it's not feasible, what about Marvel 108? This came out after the decanonization and discontinuation. SWOTOR is still publishing short stories to this day that...
I haven't seen a short story from SWOTOR for a while now. How long ago was this one? 3 days. They have been publishing short stories intermittently on the blogs, but I haven't seen one for a while. I have it in this section. It's kind of hard to find. But yeah, they haven't done one for a while, and they haven't done story updates for a while, so I don't know what's happening there. But like, yeah, the last one was a while ago. See how many pages I have to try and go back to try and find it. Usually comes up in this main news blog, and they're kind of difficult to come up, and I kind of don't like how they don't credit the actual writer of it. Yeah, it's before the date and stuff. 7.4.1 we're back to. The Shea Vizsla server, which is the Aussie server, which gives me a much better ping. Man, that's a while back. I haven't tried to look for it by going through here. Did they even address a short story in relation to the new Malgus stuff? I think the last short story, Snare short story, 2022. Has it been that long? Let me double check. Yeah, I'd have it in my timeline. What am I thinking? I'm in the wrong spot. I still have a PDF that I have for my personal use, but otherwise it's on the website. Which I probably could go to the website instead and... Let's see. So you're gonna have the pre-Old Republic... Oh no, it'll be the Old Republic era. What am I doing? That doesn't come up on the... whatever. I might have to fix that. No one told me that didn't come up. Anyway. That I was hoping this sidebar would come up for all of that. I'll have to look at how that works. Old Republic era, so Old Republic. It'll be nice to organise this by short stories, Dark Mission. No, that's later on. Yeah, the Old Republic. All that's left. 2022 though. That was still 2022. I must have done it last. All that's left short story. That's the one with Sahar. Yeah. Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. Snare was a bit earlier with the Mando stuff. And yeah, I linked it. I've been linking the SWTOR.com ones on my timeline. And so you have 2022, the 8th of April. That is literally today. That it has been 3 years since they have released a short story on SWTOR.com. Wow. Man, I'm all for these short stories, and I've always quite enjoyed them. They do require a bit of understanding of the story surrounding, but yeah. Damn. So when he says they're continually coming out, we never know when another short story is going to come out for SWTOR, and then it's just been 3 years now, and...
Are part of only the Legends timeline. No one thinks they're part of the canon timeline. No one's confused there. There's brand new SWTOR short stories set in the expanded universe timeline. Stuff like this comic book that have the Legends banner, that were created after 2014, that are proof that a continuation is feasible, it's possible, and it can happen and can work. And so I think that's a very important example. Continuation definitely is possible. Continuation has happened in isolated examples. 108 and SWTOR. There is continued EU stories that have occurred after 2014. And there absolutely can be more, regularly. New novels, new comics. That's all we're asking for. And I think that what we're asking for is pretty easy to give us. I think there's a market for it. I think there wouldn't be much confusion from it,
croaking.
because it would be easy to tell what's the difference. I think there's demand for it, and that way no one's unhappy. You're not losing your Disney canon stories. You're just gaining expanded universe legend stories. More stories to enjoy for everyone. So that's what I would like to see out of continuation. I definitely think that continuation should happen. I think continuation is a worthy cause. I think that continuation would be a great thing for the Star Wars fandom, which kind of fractured at 2014. People went this way, people went that way. And I think that the expanded universe continuing in an official capacity would help mend that a little bit, would help the embitterment, would help fans of all things Star Wars be happy. So I think that continuation could be really important. I think continuation could be very profitable for Disney. And I think continuation is necessary. These stories were cut off unceremoniously. They need finished for the fans, for the writers, for the creatives, for the brand. I think that it's essential. I think that it's imperative.
That's not good to hear, croaking. I hope that clears up soon.
I think that it's necessary. So that's what I'd like to see out of continuation. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for it, there's some very worthy causes that are...
I'm trying to process what he said, so hang on. I'm going to go back a little bit and then give some thoughts.
Confusion from it, because it would be easy to tell what's the difference. I think there's demand for it.
First of all, the demand for it. People would buy a new expanded Universal Legends stuff. Yeah. And demand's not really the issue. Even like Star Wars fans of the new canon would probably give a new Legends book a shot. And yeah, I think we're getting to a point that I'll make, but I wanted to make it on this particular point that he said.
And that way no one's unhappy. You're not...
people are always going to argue. People are going to... and depending on how it turns out, right? Who they get writing on it. What they put in it, people are going to argue about it. Marvel 108, I think, has even had arguments about it. SWTOR doesn't tend to, though.
Losing your Disney canon
doesn't come
stories.
up much.
You're just gaining expanded universe legend stories. More stories to enjoy for everyone. So that's what I would like to see out of continuation. I definitely think that continuation should happen. I think continuation is a worthy cause. I think...
I take issue with always calling it a cause type thing. Like, there was a big part of what I saw is why the fandom split so much is people politicized what opinion you had on Star Wars. And so that led to arguments like, you don't like new canon, you're blah blah blah. And so and there was a time where people would go, oh, this is a movement to continue the expanded universe and whatnot, and it politicizes it and gets some other drama in it that splits people further. So, again, it's a bit of terminology. I get you're speaking your mind and probably not scripted. Terminology is important to me, and then what that incites in people, because even unintentionally that can be a thing that happens. But also it's something I see a lot from a lot of the people talking about it are more in America, and that is a very politically heated climate, and it may be hard to separate that from your fiction, but that's what everyone wants, is the escapism of fiction, and that's why you enjoy the expanded universe or fictional stories in general. At least I'd hope so, depending on certain stories. But like, you can think of fake politics instead of real politics, taxation of the free trade zones, like, come on.
That continuation would be a great thing for the Star Wars fandom, which kind of fractured at 2014. People went this way, people went that way. And I think that the expanded universe continuing in an official capacity would help mend that a little bit. Would help.
So, in mending that a little bit, it really depends on the quality of what they put out and the attention to detail and care that they put into it. Because if they come out with something that's not great, in my opinion, you would end up going, well, some people are going to blatantly accept it and go, well, that's official Legends. That must be part of the expanded universe now. Where there's actually a good comment that I had on YouTube that could be relevant here. And it can serve as an example. Let me see if I can find it. Community that I don't know, it probably is that I haven't responded to it because are they held comments? Oh. What? Wait. What is this? Potentially inappropriate? What the hell? Oh, that's funny. Yeah, where was it? It was a little bit ago now. This fella. Oh, his comment's not coming up. Let me see if it's further. Okay, it's basically along the lines of this: hate the Revan and MMO, no, and I take Jedi Masters canon over SWTOR and MMO Jedi Masters 3 Real KOTOR 3 stuff. There was a comment by this guy, which I bet is Bean Bunny, when he's come in and made lots of alt accounts on Twitch and whatever, because he's been banned for some reason. He was saying, if you really like KOTOR and KOTOR 2, I can't understand how you accept SWTOR and the Revan novel as the actual canon. That is something that he can't comprehend. And in that, I'm like, well, yes, that's the official story, and I'm like, that's what I'm playing and all that, and a lot of the other stuff that people create is fan fiction, which I haven't read all the EU, so I tend not to delve into fan fiction much. But, that's the whole thing as well of like, even people play KOTOR. You had the Revan novel come out officially, and SWOTOR, and people were like, we do not accept this, because we want our version of KOTOR 3, and we don't like what you did with the Revan character and all of that. So, even though it's official, people won't be united around it, and that's an example of it. Specifically. And I think that's one of the more heated debates outside of TCW is Revan and the Revan novel and what they did in SWOTOR with Revan. Which, while I'm saying about that comment or whatever, I'm not particularly keen on what they did with Revan in SWOTOR, but I'm like, well, it's not going to change anything. And it's like, well, now that I've played SWOTOR and all that on YouTube, I don't tend to play it anymore. I'll play it when a new story update's there. And the Revan novel, I think there's a lot of good stuff in it. And obviously, understanding that it was framed to lead into SWOTOR, and that's like, that is a collaborative effort to go, this is how he ends up. Drew, we need you to write this so that it ends up that way. Would have to be a thing. I don't know how it exactly works out, but they would end up having to go a bit collaborative with that. Revan's a good example that not as many people, I don't see as many people bring up as a point of contention. But stuff like that, and there was even someone I knew that was like, oh, I only like the Bantam era of Star Wars Expanded Universe. Nothing Del Rey is canon to me. I was like, that's extreme.
The embitterment would help fans of all things Star Wars be happy. So I think that continuation could be really important. I think continuation could be very profitable for Disney. And I think continuation is necessary. These stories were cut off unceremoniously.
So I was losing money, and they'll ban and forget it sooner. Yeah. And I think it's also a thing of like, if they release the EU alongside the new canon, everyone will go to the EU. Everyone will go to Legends, because if it's the same quality of the storytelling and attention to detail and all that as before, they'll be like, oh, this is actually really good. And then they won't like new canon, and then it'll be like, well, we want to sell our version of Star Wars, not the version that was when George Lucas was in charge. And I have at the end gone, yes, there's unfinished stories, and it'd be nice to get the endings to them, but at this point, it's like over 10 years since the decanonization. Like, the 25th of April is going to be 11 years now. If I'm doing the maths right. Yeah. Damn. And that, in the end, is like, well, at this point, I really just enjoy what we have, and I've sort of made my peace with it. I've kind of given up actively campaigning for a continuation, but if there is a continuation, I'll buy the book or whatever and then see what it's like. But I'm not holding out any hope of it continuing unless there's a drastic change with Lucasfilm. I think and it would not just be the head honchos. I think there will be a change in multiple people that work there and their approach to Star Wars, because it seems like they're actively against Expanded Universe from everything that I've seen. So yeah. That's me at the moment. I'm like, I'll just enjoy what I have, and then also expand into other franchises. Like, Star Wars is huge and I love it. Yeah, but also when I was a kid, I read so much varied stuff, and then later on I was like, now I'm reading just Star Wars when I started my chronological read through, and now it's a bit like, again, going, I really want to vary my reading more, because it gets a fair bit to go, okay, I'm reading Star Wars all the time. And not having new stuff, having a finite universe is actually kind of nice to go, I don't need to have FOMO of, oh, I got to catch up so I can read the new thing that's coming out to be on the ball. We're talking about it and whatnot with other people. I can just go at the pace that I want.
They need finished for the fans, for the writers, for the creatives, for the brand. I think that it's essential. I think that it's imperative. I think that it's necessary. So that's what I'd like.
I'd like to hear him talk about that more in detail. Because there's multiple points I would think of, like, okay, for the creatives, I don't think that any of the creatives still at Lucasfilm doing stuff are worried about it. I haven't heard from other creatives as such that they are aching to write more Star Wars stuff. Like, yes, they have ideas. The good creatives have lots of ideas. I could think of ideas to put into practice. Do that again. It's like, that's sort of in the past now. It'd be great to recapture some of that magic, but I think it's necessary for the brand more, because it's something that will return Star Wars to its roots and be a good thing if they do it well. But if they don't do it well, it could burn. Star Wars could crash and burn completely, because they would. Anyway, it'll be interesting to hear a bit more about this type of thing.
These stories were cut off unceremoniously. They need.
Yeah, there was no transition, which was the biggest issue at the time.
Finished for the fans, for the writers, for the creatives, for the brand.
So, what would really actually appeal to them is going, it would make money. Because Disney, and it seems like Lucasfilm, would not see an appeal to it if they go, oh, it's for all the people there. It's like, they don't care about that. It's just money. It's just, let's be honest. Yeah, they can say that they do, and certain people working there would, of course. But at the end of the day, it was about money for Disney.
I think that it's essential. I think that it's imperative. I think that it's necessary. So that's what I'd like to see out of continuation.
If it's essential and imperative, then it would have been done already, I reckon. I think it's essential and imperative for certain outcomes, but it's not essential and imperative as far as depending on what they actually want to do with Star Wars.
And in the meantime, while we're waiting for it, there's some very worthy causes that are continuing the expanded universe in a fan capacity. I absolutely support
Oh, he's
that.
mentioning fanfiction.
Things like
There
the
we go.
Re-Expanded Universe project.
Yeah. So this is a fella I met on Amino. Oh, boy, that's a while ago. That is doing a re-expanded project, yeah.
Which is a fan fiction initiative of fans who are continuing the expanded universe with stories that adhere to expanded universe canonicity and continuity, and are all under one umbrella, under one banner. The Re-Expanded Universe Initiative takes the wildly popular Hand of Thrawn 45 stories and incorporates them into its canon. It's a fan fiction canon, and it determines what is going to be a part of this umbrella, and it continues the Expanded Universe as a fan fiction project initiative. And I think that that's great, and absolutely support that. Additionally, I support...
That's very interesting, yeah. Part of the issue with the fanfiction continuation that I have had is that it seems like Expanded Universe fans weren't united enough to all be on the same page to have this sort of thing work properly. So there would generally be this clique of Star Wars are doing their Star Wars Re-Expanded and are working on it, which is cool. They have enough people to do that. It's neat. But who knows when I'll get around to fan fiction, because I'm still reading Blue and Expanded Universe years later.
Additionally, I support the Expanded Supernatural Encounters stories. These are also a fan fiction initiative with stories that are being looked at by editors of Supernatural Encounters. And there's a lot of great stories under this umbrella already. Wish 13, Luke Van Horn's story.
I don't know these actual stories. I've seen about this though. But this is an exact example of what I just said, right? Is you've got two separate groups of people with their own approach to how they're going to continue it through fan fiction that would probably not work together as such. Who knows? That's interesting to see some of the titles though.
There's some cool stuff under the expanded Supernatural Encounters banner as well. Expanded Encounters. And I absolutely support that. It's a continuation of the expanded universe under a coordinated, peer-reviewed system. And it's great that the fans have taken this into their own hands, that we're making stories to finish what was started. At least it gives us a little bit of closure. But in my heart...
So, I'm curious on the stories then. If, like he's saying, finish what was started. I can talk to these people, but I haven't yet. But I'm curious as to know if they actually finished, like, done wrap-up storylines for the stories that were cut off without proper endings. Like, Dawn of the Jedi, I feel like, had a decent ending to the comic run. Of course, there would be more to happen if it had continued, but it's in a nice place where it is. There's stuff like Force Unleashed 2, stuff like that. Would be interesting to see the approach from both of them. So, whenever I get around to it, possibly whenever I get around to fan fiction, whenever that is, I will see what they do about it. I still have to play Force Unleashed 2 for on stream and sending it to YouTube and that, but it's one of those that's like, yeah, they could have gone a few crazy ways with it.
Of the expanded universe under a coordinated, peer-reviewed system.
Yeah, and that would be a separate system to the one in Re-Expanded. But hey, it's cool to get a couple of different people doing it and have different things. And the story's already out for it.
And it's great that the fans have taken this into their own hands, that we're making stories to finish what was started. At least it gives us a little bit of closure. But in my heart, even though I've contributed to these projects, even though I support and love these projects, it's not the same as official continuation. So I absolutely support fanfiction initiatives to continue the EU. But I think it's a great holdover until the day when hopefully we could get an official continuation. I think an official continuation would be really great, and it's really something that I'd like to see. So that's kind of my thoughts on...
And something I've always felt with fanfiction, when I've thought about, okay, would I continue it in fanfiction and stuff, is like, probably not. Because I feel like if we were to take it in an official direction, it will always be different to what the fans want in some ways. And it's great, they're getting the creative juices flowing, they're doing stuff for that, but I'd probably get my creativity to go in other directions and see what I'd like to do with that. And there's a lot of things that I'm like, I plan to do these things, but then it's like, in the end, it's like, they don't seem to have started yet. But anyway, it's late anyway.
Continuation, my little ramble here. Make sure to check out Marcel's video, Alex's video, Maxine's video. I think it's an important topic, and I think it's one that isn't talked about a lot.
Alex's video.
I think somewhere along the way, people forgot.
I'll look at the Alex one another time, probably.
Or people just didn't know what the continuation is that we're asking for. We're not asking to replace Disney canon. We're asking for continuation alongside it. And I think that that's very important. I think that it's very feasible. I think that it's likely. I think there's a chance that we get our stories continued and concluded. And I think that it's imperative that it happens. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know your thoughts on continuation of the expanded universe in the comments.
Oh, I clicked it just as it ended. It's probably one that I will have a look at later. Then Alex's video, if he's done it yet. He doesn't seem to have done it yet. That's fine. Okay, so that's the two at the moment, and another time I'll probably end up having a look at Magneto Alex's as well, because some of the discussion around that is interesting. But yeah, some of it also retreads the same ground, and it's like, okay, I love that people are hopeful for it. Still, it's nice to see some of the passion there, but also some parts are like, whoa. Realistic? Maybe.